Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Double A Media. This is my first remote podcast that I've done, and I have the pleasure to have a senior principal engineer from AWS, Anthony Virtuoso. Anthony, thanks for doing this with me and for giving me this chance.
Yeah, of course. Anytime, buddy.
Yeah, so for all the people who are listening, Anthony has an array of achievements and has been in this industry for more than 20 years. I was looking at his LinkedIn and I could find from a technology intern at Deutsche Bank to a VP of numerous securities, and most of his involvements in AWS I personally know just because we both work within AWS Lambda. But not only that, he has multiple patents in distributed systems, in security, defined network systems, and he even has his own book. So Anthony has been like pretty much involved in this space, and I have the pleasure today to ask him a few questions about software engineering and where we're headed and some of the recent changes that have kind of changed the workflow. Anthony, are you excited for this?
I am, although you're going to give me a big ego. You keep building me up like that. Next time
No,
my imposter syndrome sneaks up on me, I might give you a call for that pep talk.
no. This is just like a humble introduction. I bet I didn't even cover like even the most important achievements that you have. But with that being said, I'm gonna get straight into it. I'm curious to know what got you involved in this field. What was some of the few sparks that you had in the beginning that yes, I want to do computer science, I want to get involved in tech, and now you're here.
Oh man, honestly, quite a bit of luck and accident to be frank. Um, I mean, a little bit of background on me, you know, I guess you could say my family was pretty, well, lower middle class is too high to describe it. Like it was pretty rough like when I was a kid. I didn't know that. My parents did what parents do and kind of hide that. But my parents both came over here from Italy in the early 70s, I want to say. Neither one of them had much schooling. They both grew up on like farms, like sustenance living, like you don't grow it, you don't eat it, you don't trade, for it to get milk from your neighbor's cows, you don't have milk kind of thing.
Hmm.
When they came to the States looking for opportunity, starting a family and whatnot, like they didn't have a lot of education, but they were hard workers. And so growing up, like they were really creative on how to keep my sister and I entertained. And one of the weird things that they used to do for me is I used to like to take stuff apart. So in the
Hmm.
town that I grew up in Jersey, every Wednesday was like they called it like heavy trash night. People would throw out TVs, electronics, appliances. And so like my dad was a contractor, like manual labor. He would drive me around on Wednesday nights with his pickup truck and we used to grab whatever random stuff. People were throwing out like old Tandy computers. I didn't know what the hell a computer was, but that thing
Yeah.
looked cool and it had a lot of cool parts inside. And so like our basement was full of random shit that I would take apart, sometimes reassembling motors and gears and like make a little thing that was fun to me, but was ultimately just kind of like cobbled together from trash. And
Hmm.
so that was kind of like how it started, including like an incident where like I took apart like the family TV in the living room one day. They were not happy about that. And then so, like that kind of went on. And then when, I got into like high school and then ultimately like thinking about college, it's funny because like at that time I remember very clearly sitting with my guidance counselor and thinking to myself like, oh, I know everything there is to know about hardware. I took
Yeah.
all this stuff apart. I don't know much about software. Why don't we go that route? And so like
Hmm.
that was like this really weird kind of pivotal decision for me based on no real information, right? Like taking apart appliances you took out of the garbage is not actually equivalent to having a background in education and hardware. But that was what sent me down the software path. And I was
Well,
lucky enough that like my parents, even though they themselves didn't have like a ton of education, they valued it super highly. Like they drilled into my sister and I like, you don't want to do manual labor. You don't want to be in the position we're in. You go to school, you focus on your studies and all that. So that's like more or less kind of how I landed where I did. It wasn't because like I had some grand foresight that,
yeah.
computers and computer science would be such a great field and career. It was very much just like it was interesting and cool to take stuff apart. I thought I knew everything about hardware, and it led to what's the other side of the equation? Software.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting that it started both from luck but also passion. So I guess you're right in that. And I wonder, like in the beginning, when you kind of like faced the few, key challenging parts, instead of giving up and, saying, okay, this is just not for me, I'm transitioning to something else. I guess you decided to build your skills and like develop your problem solving. I wonder, like, your approach back then and in the beginning of your career, is it still the same approach that you have now, or would you allow yourself to, be open to new methods now because of all the changes that have happened?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wish I could say that like there's some grand plan going on in my mind, but it's like really kind of like simplistic. I think I should also probably say like just for any Amazon lawyers or HR people who may be sniffing in on this, all the opinions I'm about to share are my own. It's not reflective of Amazon or AWS. Collectively, AWS is way smarter than me. So just
Yeah.
rest assured, somebody smarter than me is keeping me in check. Okay. I think one of the things that, again, accidentally, not attracted me to Amazon, but kind of has kept me here is some
Hmm.
of the leadership principles, including deliver results. Like that's the thing at the end of the day for me. Like the way you got there, the method you took to get to that endpoint is not always terribly interesting to me. It's about the output. And maybe some of this comes from like my dad, like was in construction. He used to build things, build a house, build cabinets. Like the person cares about the thing at the end of the day. They didn't care about the tool you used to build it, how you made a dovetail joint. They just care, does it work? Does it look good? And how much did it cost me? And so like a lot of the way I build is kind of like that too, right? Like doesn't matter how beautiful the thing is or what how elegant the algorithms were if it doesn't do the intended job or what the person needed it to do. So I've never really been super partial to like one approach or one technology or whatever. I mean, like any other engineer, like I'll get enamored with things like Rust is super cool, right?
Hmm.
Or whatever the kind of flavor of the month is. But it was always just kind of about like what's the best path to get to that outcome, right? If that means learning a new technology, if that means kind of forcing yourself out of your comfort zone, you kind of have to make this choice. Do you want to stay relevant and accomplish the task, or do you want to be comfortable or do the thing you like, right? You're not always lucky enough that the thing you like, the thing people will pay you to do, and the thing people need all
Oh,
intersect,
yeah.
right? Like every once in a while you get lucky and it's all three, but more often than not, like it's two or one.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because it reminds me of my algo professor at Vanderbilt, and on the topic of deliver results, he was also like big on getting a solution first, then figuring out how you can refine it. But that part of like coming to the solution is so important and integral that I think sometimes people like overlook that and jump into like other over engineering or over analyzing parts. Um, but I guess like a pivot to that, I think right now with AI and all the noise that I'm sure you hear every day, and with the media saying it's enhancing productivity and it's allowing people to come to that delivering results faster. I guess like what are few things that you feel certain that will actually change software engineering going forward? I know this is a hard question because nobody's certain these days, but I think having an audience from junior engineers and my college friends, like we are all looking up to somebody who is more experienced in the field and has kind of a better visibility in the space right now.
I don't know, is that person here or is that supposed to be me?
I
No,
think
I'm teasing. I'm teasing. So,
uh,
look, I think in general, anybody that kind of portrays themselves as being able to predict the future on this one, like just be super skeptical.
yeah.
So I can give you some of my best guesses or like yeah, like where I would kind of put money on what the outcomes might be.
Hmm.
So I think you kind of have to think about a few things here. One, like what can the technologies do today? What can the engineers of today do? And like where are the incentives, right? And so again, like I'm just going to put an exclamation point on this that what I'm about to say is my view. It's not Amazon's view. Nobody at Amazon has said the following to me or anything like that.
Neither is mine, also worth
Yeah,
mentioning
lots
there.
of disclaimers here. I don't know if you can kind of
Yeah.
edit in some floating disclaimers, but maybe that would be good. But so like a little bit more background on me that'll help tie this together. So like when I was in college, it was right around kind of the dot-com bubble popping, or maybe slightly before it. I was in college. I don't know, but either way,
Mm-hmm.
My CS class started with something like 140 CS majors, and by the time we graduated, only 20 of us were still in the major. Not because they couldn't cut it, but because the whole time they just saw like there's no jobs, professors are telling them to switch careers, and so 100 plus of them switched to other majors.
Mm-hmm.
And so right off the bat, like when I got out of school, there was no software job for me. I ended up working at a help desk at Lehman Brothers, resetting mainframe passwords for traders. And yeah, so that, I mean, and that turned into like writing automation software for the help desk so that we didn't have like 100 people answering phones. And like little by little, it kind of turned into some software opportunities. But then, like Lehman ended up kind of going bankrupt through this kind of crazy financial crisis and a whole bunch of interesting but stories for another day type nonsense that was going on there. And so, like, I saw this unfold. So first with the dot-com bubble, then with this thing at Lehman. And then I ended up at Nomura with a bunch of ex-Lehman people, and that place was kind of funny too because they would go through like boom and bust cycles where like they would throw a whole bunch of money in, it wouldn't go anywhere, and then they would fold up, and then a few years later they'd be like, let's try that thing again. And so this cycle, right, of like potentially easy money, lots of opportunity, and then contraction. And like through all this, you see, or like what I feel like I've learned, and other people before me have probably learned, companies have very specific incentives. They're trying to make money. They're trying to
Mm-hmm.
make money. They're trying to minimize costs. So you think about what generative AI. One of the things it can do for companies is it can allow them to move much faster with a lot fewer resources, and it makes it less expensive both from a risk and a pure dollars perspective to go dip their toe into any idea they have. And so, like, if you're a CEO, a board who has responsibilities to shareholders, that sounds like why wouldn't I go and try this out? It's a bunch of the things that are structurally hard about many businesses. It's kind of like almost feels like a magic wand way to make a
Mm-hmm.
whole bunch of those dimensions easier. So I think the incentives are there that companies are going to go and try this thing, and they're going to stick with it, even if it's not necessarily um, delivering those returns early on. Like if it's hard to achieve the outputs. All right, so I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the backdrops to keep in mind. The second backdrop to keep in mind is that this stuff is going to keep getting better. Like
Yeah.
unless you're willing to place a huge bet to be like collectively the generative AI industry, Nvidia, all these LLM providers, your Anthropic, your OpenAI are just going to wake up tomorrow and be like, "We're done. It's finished." Like it
Let's
seems
go back to what
super,
we used to do before. Yeah.
yeah, like it seems super unlikely that this stuff is not going to continue to get better. Is it going to get better at the same rate? I'm not sure. Like it's probably like a bit of an S curve. And maybe we need to find maybe there's another innovation that's going to unlock that next step function. I don't know, but it seems unlikely that it's done improving. Okay.
Yeah.
So then you look at that third piece, which is like the engineers we have today and what these things can do today. I mean, I know from myself, a lot of, I mean, it's hard to put a percentage on it, but the vast majority of functions or individual classes that I would previously write by hand, it is very proficient to let like a Claude, I mean, even just like a Claude Sonnet or like Google released Gemma 4 a few weeks ago, like open weight model. It can do a lot of like these
Yep.
basic functions. Is it going to get architecture right every time? Is it going to get the nuances of like, hey, if I use a lock this way, this is going to make it really easy to deadlock when I do the next story for this project? No, it's not great at like looking ahead and at that stuff yet. Maybe that will improve, maybe it won't. But if you just think about like any given file in a code base, right? That's let's say 5,000 lines or less, which
Mm-hmm.
should be most or all files in a sane code base should fit within that area. It's pretty darn good at being able to write that stuff now. Now, need a human oversight maybe to give it a little bit of a nudge of how that plays with other things in the code base or how to structure like the right interfaces for things so it's not like a ton of trial and error. But even that right there is like a hugely powerful primitive, at least for people like me. And this is kind of where maybe we'll start to talk about the dichotomy between
Mm-hmm.
like how this stuff helps or affects like a more experienced engineer versus somebody that's more junior. So like for me, like a typical day, unfortunately, there's a lot of randomization. Who needs a few minutes of my time to go over an idea? Who's stuck on something and somebody sends me their way, hoping that I have some kind of a magic solution. But oftentimes, like I don't think there's a whole lot of magic there. More often than not, I'm just a rubber duck. Oh, the background wouldn't let you see my rubber duck.
I see it. I see it.
Yeah, this is Eduardo, by the way. He probably gets credit for more than half of the patents you mentioned.
It's a golden one too.
Yes, the golden duck. Couldn't find a goose. But so for somebody like me whose day was kind of randomized a lot and made it difficult to get into a state of flow, like regularly without me kind of like locking out my calendar and telling people to leave me alone for a while, this has been powerful because like in between meetings or when I only have like a half hour or an hour, I can get a lot more done because it's a lot easier for me to get into a state of flow when I'm thinking about like a higher order abstraction. Like maybe I'm just thinking about interfaces or I'm just thinking broadly about like the next story I want to get done. And it doesn't matter too much if I'm delegating to a Gen AI and I have
Mhm.
to kind of nudge it three, four, five, six revisions to get the thing right. That was time I wasn't able to spend anyway continuously. Whereas like if you go to more junior folks, and like I realize this is pretty sensitive, so like all of you guys who may be listening to this should take this a little bit with a grain of salt, but this is where, and you've heard me probably say this a bunch, Albi, at work, it is really important for you guys to embrace this as much as you can, because I think right now it can put junior people at a little bit of a structural disadvantage. So
Mhm.
where I can now do all this stuff in like these 15, 30-minute chunks of time, because of all the past experience I have and past mistakes I've made, right, where I can give it a prompt and have it go figure out some details. For a lot of more junior people, they need to build that experience.
Yeah.
And in the past, building that experience meant go build stuff, be on
Yeah.
projects, make mistakes, have somebody more senior there as a safety net to stop you from stepping off that building, but let you get close enough that you learn it and remember it.
Mhm.
And so if we just do things the way we did, junior folks can be at a disadvantage. But if you kind of if you grasp if you kind of latch onto this stuff and really try and embrace it, there's a catalyst here too, even for junior people. Because if you think about it, or if I think about myself early in my career, 3, 4 years of projects as a junior person to get enough experience, see enough patterns, see enough mistakes, see enough of what's possible and how like technology can be a difference for the business before it starts to click, right? And that would take years before because it's how long it took to do enough projects to get like for a person like me who's more breadth focused and not like super deep in one area, it takes time. But
Mhm.
now with these tools, you can compress a lot of projects into a much smaller time period, right? You can go compress a lot of mistakes into a smaller time period and hopefully learn from them. So this is kind of like the dichotomy of it, where like in a way, it advantages senior or more experienced engineers differently than it advantages junior ones. For
Yeah.
junior ones, historically, I think a lot of companies look at junior engineers as a velocity engine, right? You have them to add velocity to a project. You're not necessarily bringing them all in because they all have the best judgment. They're growing that judgment, right? Their judgment may be really good at a I mean, this may be not the most well thought out idea here, but like at a function or a class level, just to kind of try and put something relative on it. Whereas a more experienced engineer maybe has good judgment at a package level or a system level, or maybe a product level, right? But with these tools, it lets you accelerate how quickly you can potentially build that experience.
Yeah. I I honestly really like your point that it just enables you to dip your feet in the water and trying new stuff that before was not necessarily, available. And I see this across my friends who are software engineers, but more so I see it also like across people who don't have really even coding experience and, have great ideas. But for the people who, are software engineers, sometimes I think there's this debate on how much can you rely on these tools to boost your productivity and how much you need to do your own thinking. And there's this term I've been reading through Reddit of AI creating a cognitive debt. Basically,
Hmm.
just we're outsourcing all of our, problem solving power that we have to put into a problem to, have the LLM basically devise a solution. And it's this like, I guess, dichotomy of do I want to be very productive or do I want to take this opportunity cost of like not being as productive, but build that, pattern recognition and discipline and hard work that Anthony has built throughout his years. And, making that choice as a junior developer is pretty hard because in one side you have these hallucinations that AI provides to you, and you're not sure you can rely on it. But on the other side, you don't want to be left behind, and you want to be on top of the next agentic infrastructure and architecture, and how you can develop these and produce produce a lot. So this is probably like another question with not a concrete answer, but I guess like what are some fine lines that me personally can define, or what are some boundaries that would be good to set on reliance for these tools?
Man, I don't. If I had known all your questions were going to be this hard, Albie, I don't know if I would have honestly said yes.
I
No,
mean,
I'm kidding.
we don't
I'm
have
kidding.
exact answers. We just have like a combination.
Yeah, no, maybe I can give you a bit of an analogy, and then we can try to arrive at an answer. But like, I remember like when I was in college, they would make us do. We did everything in C and C++.
Hmm.
And like at the time, I didn't know any better. That was like the main or first language I had ever learned, and never really thought to look beyond that. But like they would make us do everything from like write like some basic operating system stuff, write like your typical merge sort, quick sort, like the basic algorithms and data structures all written on our own. And then I remember like I think it was like junior year or senior year, then they started introducing Java and all these standard libraries, and I'm like, why the hell did you make me write all that stuff by hand? Like this is all just here. Why did we do that? And I got like some kind of half-baked answer of like, more or less, it's like about the journey. And so, I kind of think there's probably a lot of truth in that, and that professor didn't necessarily do themselves a favor and explain it well to me. But if you think about what's going on, like right now, or like the Java analogy, right?
Hmm.
Java, higher level language, abstracts more away, does more for you. On the one hand, it's like, well, yeah, but now you don't know how any of this stuff works. You don't know how memory aligned structures or any of this stuff. Like in my day and age, we used to have to care about that kind of thing, right? So I think this is just the same problem repeated slightly differently. Like before LLMs, even, at work, I bet if you asked a bunch of different engineers, honestly, it's a little bit embarrassing, like the difference between TCP and UDP. I bet we'd be shocked at how few engineers that are good engineers at our company don't really understand the difference between TCP and UDP, or IPv4 and IPv6, or how like a top half and a bottom half work on an interrupt in a Linux kernel. Because you don't need to know, most people don't need to know that anymore. It has been so well abstracted and, I'll call it like a solved problem that most people never really bump into that until they run into some like performance edge case, or they're trying to do something really innovative around distributed systems, and now suddenly it matters the nuanced difference between like a TCP or a UDP for your use case. And
Hmm.
so, as it's a tale as old as time, Graybeard complains that nobody understands how the system works anymore because they're so far removed from it. Maybe this generative AI stuff is just the next smarter
Yeah.
compiler, right? Like
Yeah.
so I think there's an element of that for sure, that we probably just need to get used to the fact that this is a higher order abstraction.
Hmm.
Now, that at this comes what comes with that is we need to have an appreciation for the fact that we are now another layer removed from how this stuff actually works under the hood. And
Hmm.
so while probably not everybody can completely ignore all the bits and pieces underneath, the vast majority of people will be effective and productive engineers without that same depth of knowledge. But what is pretty universal is like being curious and understanding that, like, even though you may not know how it works, it's not that hard to say, hey, Claude, what happens during an interrupt? Hey,
Yeah.
Claude, what happens when IOPS happen? What is an IOP? Why does it matter? Why does my system get slower when IOPS go up? Right? Like being you in some ways, this is like even more powerful because it's a not only abstracting you from some of these, but it knows
Hmm.
how to explain the abstraction,
Yeah.
right? Past abstractions didn't couldn't do that for you.
I think that's precisely one of my key realizations is that LLMs not only are good builders, workers, but I think they're better teachers in a sense too. Like if you're just utilizing them for your own knowledge base and building that up, I think you can fine tune it to your style of learning to, receive these information and kind of more complicated concepts to build on. And it's kind of like what you're suggesting as well here too. Do you personally use it as a form of like also learning, or is that at a higher level for you where it gets things wrong?
I mean, it definitely gets stuff wrong. But yeah, I definitely use it for learning. Like, like in different ways. Like I guess probably like two ways. One, a lot of times like I'll ask it to go build something and I'll give it like carte blanche. Like here's
Mm-hmm.
root access, do whatever you want on this machine. Goal is make this work. Because
Mm-hmm.
afterwards, I want to go dissect it and figure out like how the hell did it get it to work? Like I'll give you one example. I mean, these are like really small, not super like interesting to most people experiments, but trying to self-host an LLM. You can grab something super easy like an Olama that basically just does everything for you. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to get that wrong. Like you download it, hit run, and like boom, you got stuff. But you can also go play with things like VLLM directly, or things like SGLang. Right? These are more powerful tools from my perspective, more complicated and way less stable. Like they seem to change every 30 minutes in terms of like the parameters you need, the features they support. But I give Claude access to a couple DC2 instances in
Mm-hmm.
my personal account and say like, hey, can you go set up VLLM and Gemma 4 and then walk me through what you did? Right now, it's not great at it. It gets it working, but it's not necessarily producing the perfect implementation. But it gets me from zero knowledge to more than zero fast. And then I can go look for specific things. Um, and so like that like kind of that acceleration, just like we were talking about with junior engineers, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can compress a lot of mistakes really fast, right? Especially me, like I have two kids, I'm married, I have a real job. Apparently, I do podcasts with my friend Albi. There's not a lot of time in there for me to go and experiment with VLLM. And so, like, if I go play with it after like 45 minutes, if I still can't get it running, now
Mm-hmm.
it's like this ROI conversation in my mind. How much more time can I pour into this supposedly fun experiment and I don't have anything to show for it?
Yeah.
Versus saying, hey, Claude, go get a basic thing set up. 15, 20 minutes later, it's working. And now I
Mm-hmm.
can spend the second half hour dissecting it, understanding it, and trying to tweak it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way. And the second way is honestly, a lot of times I'll just ask it, hey, like, can you go show me four ways to do this along with sources? And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, it's accelerating research, right? I mean, I remember seeing a stat a while ago, like somebody posted their history from their browser, like visits to Google for searches and visits to Stack Overflow, and then
Mm-hmm.
like overlaid the introduction of Claude 4, Claude 4.5, and so on, and like they're inverse, right? And, like it just I don't really do Google searches anymore. I don't go to
Yeah.
Stack Overflow anymore.
Yeah.
These tools have replaced that for me and better because I can ask them to like produce a report as opposed to produce search results.
Yeah. And it's, I think, building on that point, not only they're replacing like huge companies' services that are widely used, I think now with the recent development of agentic capabilities, we see like whole workflows of people who work for companies being able to be automated and replaced. And, I think the idea of like having agents basically do what you're doing or being able to build them is becoming like a prevalent skill that I'm noticing. And I wonder what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think where do you envision this space? Like maybe two sentences on like the future of agents and how they're intersecting with current workloads and I don't know what's the best way to position ourselves to ride this wave in a way.
Oh man, that's a complex question. So I think in term for automation, I feel like this is the technology that most automation um, opportunities has been waiting for. Like years ago, I remember spending a lot of time with a consultant from BMC. I'm not even sure they're still around,
Hmm.
but they had this whole automation suite that they had convinced Lehman to spend ungodly amounts of consulting dollars on, and I feel like never really produced much of anything that you can do with a shell script.
Hmm.
And one of the biggest challenges was like edge cases. Well,
Hmm.
edge cases that it had to deal with, and also unclear asks from a user. An user will very rarely explain what they want the same way every time. It's fuzzy, right?
Hmm.
Same thing, failure modes can be fuzzy. I mean, like you could attempt to enumerate every failure mode possible, but the more complex the thing you're automating, the more number of things that you need to
Tough, yeah.
understand can fail. And you're even assuming that all those downstream dependencies even modeled their failures in a
Mhm.
discrete way that you could even get visibility into what the hell happened in the transitive thing. And LLMs are great for that. Fuzzy in, fuzzy out, and they're super good. And not to mention how easy it is to plug tools into them, give them skills, give them MCPs. Now, there's a whole bunch of gotchas around security and safety, which is why I think you see things like OpenClaw take off. Not because OpenClaw had a lot of like novel innovation there. I think like the most novel thing that OpenClaw really had was, I don't know, what can this thing do if we just stop caring about security, right? And so for the first time, you really got to see the raw ability in a practical sense. If you, I mean, the OpenClaw creators may not appreciate me saying it, but like if you largely kind of relax how nervous you are about the level of access you're giving it. And to their credit, like it showed the world, these things are way more capable than a lot of people thought, even if we haven't yet figured out how to let them do it safely.
Mhm.
I mean, the best way we can kind of ride that wave is, like I said before, like really embrace this stuff, play with it, try it, understand what it's good at, understand what it's not good at. And I think honestly, the hardest part of that is the rate of change. Because like
Mm.
you invest an hour to go learn something or read up on it today, next week you got to do another hour because it
Yeah,
changed.
yeah. And like being adaptable becomes like more important than ever. I wonder like what are some of your personal core beliefs that you've had throughout your career, you know? And I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes in the field just because of the nature of tech. What are some of the core beliefs and mindsets that you've had personally that has allowed you to adopt very rapidly?
Hmm. I think these are going to be uninteresting answers, Albi.
I mean,
So like deliver results is like the end of the day guiding principle for me. And like, if we were to grab a PDF of like all my year-end feedback at Amazon, consistently you would see in there like too delivery focused, not
mhm.
enough think big. Like these are the typical criticisms of me, by choice because like I don't care if there's a shiny new tool. Is that shiny new tool making anything easier?
Yeah.
Is it if it's equivalent to a tool I already have, I don't need to take the risk of go adding another dependency, another new thing that maybe fizzles out or whatever. So to me, like in some regards, you have to be careful about your innovation budget. There
Mhm.
are parts of your project and your product and your career where it makes sense to go be innovative, be at that leading edge. There's a high value there. Like for example, it's probably not an open secret that we work a lot on Lambda and Lambda related technologies at work, right?
Yeah.
So some of the Lambda's claim to fame, it's dense, fast starting, isolated compute. All three of those together without sacrificing. So if there was a place we were going to innovate or spend our innovation budget, and by innovation budget, this is like a mix of like it's a risky thing. I don't know if it can be done. Maybe physics is a problem. Like there's invention required to accomplish that. On a project for a given set of people, there's only so much innovation risk and
Mhm.
budget you have to spend before you dramatically increase the likelihood that it never ships or takes so long to ship that the market moved on. Right? But
Mhm.
so in that area on Lambda, it makes sense to spend your innovation budget there. Okay. Now, let's say on log shipping, which is an important thing, right? Ops is important. I don't know that I'm going to go and fund some crazy idea to change the way we do logging because the ROI equation is different. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean we'll never innovate on logging, but the balance is different there. And so saying like this applies to me on learning new tools too. And like I don't want to call it a second mover advantage, but sometimes, yeah, if it's not part of the core promise and value proposition of a product or project, I'm happy to wait and let that thing evolve before I decide to adopt it in a not core area. And that's kind of counterintuitive because you might think, hey, in the central part of your project, why would you take on risky dependencies? Well, it
Mhm.
depends. Does that risky dependency do something that nobody else can do or solves a problem that is super meaningful? Well, then like it's more the risk reward is different. Doesn't mean I'm just going to YOLO it into prod, right? But I'm
Yeah.
willing to go run the experiment and take the chance that I spend time on something I don't ship there versus spending the time and not shipping something that's like on the ancillary part of my project. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it does. I think and putting all of this under the umbrella of delivering results kind of like makes sense to me because I think quite often myself I catch just doing analysis paralysis of like, oh, is this better to, you know, try this LLM or should I code it myself or do I want to research more about XYZ procedure? And then at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like all that thinking doesn't matter if you don't have anything tangential to show. So getting ahead and just starting building or starting shipping sounds like, you know, a good way to like learn and deliver results and also build the experience. But then, you know, I think after that, you can do a little bit of a retro and see where what gaps you missed or how you can iterate on it to make it faster for the next project. I
Yeah.
think like um right now, we still have that space where I think software engineers are needed, and we want to excel at this um, industry, even though it's evolving and it's shaping what it means to be a software engineer. There's a lot of cynicism about the role being just completely done in the future, and I don't think that's the case personally with my surface level understanding. I think it's just gonna evolve into something else or change in its nature, but I'm curious to know if that kind of idea or dump hypothesis matches with what you have envisioned this space moving in, I don't know, maybe the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things where like I don't know if you've read any of the stuff that Steve Yegge has written. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of his writing style. It's a little interesting, but he does make some good points sometimes. And one of the things that he kind of mentions, it almost kind of he almost kind of equates Gen AI adoption to like the stages of grief. You kind
Okay.
of go through these motions where like, maybe at first you're kind of like scared, like, am I gonna have a job? Then you're like angry, like the stupid things coming from my job. And then you kind of like you start to just you kind of start to make peace with it. Then you start to get kind of like excited because like maybe you tried it and now like every harebrained idea you can just go kick off.
Yeah.
Then you get really tired because you're doing too many of these things at once. And like there's this whole cycle. Um, but I think where I've kind of landed is the following. A lot of the stuff we do today is going to go away.
Hmm.
Um, there's going to be new stuff to do. Why is there going to be new stuff to do? Well, I'll give you an example, right? My 10-year-old son, who doesn't really know how to code, has
Hmm.
access to my Claude subscription, okay, my
Nice.
personal one. He plays a lot of Minecraft. He
Okay.
creates Minecraft mods at a rate that is astonishing to me, mostly because he's constantly complaining he's running out of disk space because he creates like all these mods for every little idea he has. He knows nothing about software, but he is creating an enormous amount of software. And so what happens? Daddy, this thing doesn't work. And then I
Hmm.
got to go in and I got to figure out what the heck happened and help him get his creepers working again or whatever it is, right?
Okay.
Now that is like a microcosm of what will happen everywhere. Anybody with an idea can now go and quickly create that idea. And they can turn it into something they can touch and feel that they can maybe go put in front of a VC and get funding, but they may need somebody with more experience and maybe some more classical training, right, in software to take that thing to production, to scale that thing.
Hmm.
Now, where is that line? I don't know. But like it seems obvious to me that there will be way more software created in the future. And
Hmm.
so like if this is kind of like where it's like this equation, it's got to find an equilibrium. If you take the software we have today and the way we build it today, I think there will probably be less of us doing those classical things. But then there will be there will be this wave of way more software, and then you'll need more people to go do the parts of those that you're either not comfortable fully handing off to an LLM or may never
Hmm.
be able to be handed off to an LLM. So there will be some equilibrium state. I'm very certain
Yeah.
of it. I don't think we're going to go to no software people, but the mix of what our jobs is going to change, I think, and it's already changing. Like I expect that we'll spend more time, more of the human percentage of time on things like design and code
Hmm.
review. I mean, I don't know, maybe they're going to figure out something for code review, but at least at the moment, that's a lot of the inspection point and feedback point that we're going to be able to steer the LLM is by looking at what it produced and saying, Jesus, no, there's way too many locks here. We're going to deadlock everywhere if we do it this way, right? And then the LLM will gladly go and be like, oh, you're right. I don't need to put a lock around every object. There's no contention here. One lock for everything is fine, right? But so there's going to be this oscillation, right? And there's going to be uncomfortable periods for me, for you, for a bunch of us while the
Hmm.
industry is oscillating on and figuring out what that new equilibrium is going to be.
I see. Well, that's reassuring to hear, and I kind of am excited for the future. I really look forward to it. I think embracing it, as you said previously, to reiterate your point, is the only way to go forward. And we don't know what's next, but we can definitely like ride this wave as well. And I want to be mindful of your time. I know you have so many things in your plate, and I just want to ask one final question. Maybe like I'll connect it in analogy to young Anthony going again with his dad, this time not finding a computer or like a TV, but let's say a MacBook with Claude access with infinite tokens. In the same way you used to pick a computer and like figure its parts, if you had this, Claude infinite tokens, let's say perfect LLM, almost AGI level, what would be something that you'd want to ask, or what would be something you'd want to build and share with the world?
Oh man, that is a hard question. I got to imagine it would have been some kind of a game.
Hmm.
I got to imagine it would have been some kind of a game. Um,
Hockey game, maybe?
maybe, maybe, but probably some kind of a tower defense game. I don't know why. I love tower defense games. Yeah, I think it would probably be something like that if I had to guess. If we could fast forward like a little bit, where like maybe I had a little bit more knowledge of like the world, I think it would be hard to. I think it would be hard to avoid the trap of trying to build some kind of an automated trading system.
Hmm.
Feels like there are way too many people enamored with those
Yeah.
things and
My
potentially
roommate
making
as well
money.
is trying to do that, and yeah, it sounds
Yeah.
like it's a complicated challenge.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it is. But yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one, Albi. I don't have a good answer for that. Like I
Well,
said, I'm not the think big guy. For me, necessity is the mother of invention. I see
nice.
a problem, I can go attack it. But otherwise, if I don't see a problem, I'm pretty happy to just go sit on the beach.
Well, that's sweet to hear. And even if you do decide eventually to build that tower game, I'm sure like I'm gonna be one of the few users to try it out. So that's exciting too.
We may have to make you into a sprite in that game if you're willing to license your likeness to us.
Yeah. Anthony, thank you so much for your time. It's been really a pleasure and a privilege, honestly, to have this time with you and ask these big questions that have no absolute right answers, but just having you tackle them and break them down and kind of illustrate your own thinking and how you navigate through these questions in your mind. I'm sure it's been giving me reassurance, but also like the people who are kind of like on the same field and on the same boat as me. So again, thank you for your time and for your wisdom.
No, come on. Like this is just absurd to me, Albie. But like thanks for having me and it's been fun to kind of have a chat and do something different here. I mean, if folks are kind of like worried about the Gen AI stuff, like I really cannot stress how much you should try and temper that. There are always changes. There are always disruptions. They come in different shapes. This is not going to be any different from the others. Maybe the main difference is that it's maybe happening a bit faster, but like things like this will always change. Like the structure is incentivized to disrupt itself. It's just like a kind of like a fact of nature or a rule of nature, whatever you want to call it. So just be comfortable evolving and like try not to kind of dwell on like the negative parts of it too much because you'll be there forever in your career. It'll be Gen AI now. It'll be quantum in a little bit when all your Bitcoins go to zero because of quantum computing. And who knows what after that.
Yeah, well, I'll leave I guess the podcast on that note. Again, thank you, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Have a good one.